What's up, water cooler? I'm Tristan Linville, this Georgia fan guy, whatever way he is. That's Michael Callahan. And we are here for episode 25. That's a quarter of a century on Water Cooler Talks on manufacturing and technology. Michael, how's the quarter century feel?
It's big. A couple more gray hairs if you can't see which I don't know which side I'm pointing to. But we're brighter than ever now. Just
brighter than ever. Well, guess what? We have a brighter than ever guest today, but before he comes on, I would like to tell you a joke.
Please do.
Okay. Will glass coffins ever be used?
I don't know.
Remains to be seen.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I got that one. I got it.
I slowed it down just for you.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right.
Who's joining us today?
Well, I got my good buddy, Brad Symaka. Let's get him front and center.
What's going on, Brad?
Hey, guys. Good to see you, Tristan, Michael.
What a day. You're like, you are the show right now, by the way.
Yeah.
No pressure.
No pressure.
So, everybody, Brad is a colleague of ours. He is the director of Infor Data Management Solutions here at Infor. And it's going to be a fun session because it's going to be a topic that I don't think gets talked about enough. And Brad's really smart, and Michael and I are not. So it's going to be great.
A lot of questions.
You guys are smart guys.
A lot of questions. Questions, you may retract that statement.
Yeah, the users, the listeners do not think so.
That's so, right.
Brad, tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, what Infor Data Management Solutions is, and just kind of give us a little overview, and then we'll start grilling you with questions.
Yeah, no, that sounds great, Tristan. So I've been with Infor for 10 years now, and being with Infor, I've done everything from like delivery to sales, and really now, starting earlier this year, I'm looking over our data management practice for the Americas, and it's really based on an acquisition we did last summer of a company called Albanero.
Okay.
And Albanero was actually exclusively partnered with Infor for like 4 years prior to the acquisition. So we've been working closely together with them on a lot of data related deals.
Yeah, amazing. So I think for Michael and I and our beloved listeners, I think we should start the line in the sand and just say, hey, what is data management? What's a data mesh? Why is that important? And we'll start there.
Yeah, so data management is really your ability to manage your data across your enterprise, right? So you have an application landscape. You may have multiple business units running different systems or multiple systems, ERPs, CRMs, PLMs, and it's all data that's remaining in silos throughout the business that, doesn't give the ability for companies to really understand or make smart decisions or build strategies around, because there's no way to consolidate that data. So what data management does, it allows for the operationalization of bringing that together to cleanse the data, right? Come up with a data taxonomy, data dictionaries, and use technology to ensure that you have one golden record across all of your data domains across the enterprise.
Okay. And so, and it's kind of funny because last week we interviewed a Bill. Michael, is it Kennedy? It's hard for me to say.
Yeah.
Which Brad lives in Canada. But so Bill Kennedy, right, CEO of OTC and also Airhead Engineered Products, he had mentioned something about data in that conversation and kind of the lagging data that comes through, and it's ultimately when it's lagging and you're not seeing some of that stuff, it's probably because it's not connected. Is that a fair statement? Because it's not connected and can't be surfaced to the users and the decision makers?
Yeah, that's part of it. So there's a couple of different technologies that are offered to help solve for that. So ultimately, you want to have good data that you're using to drive dashboards and drive analytics, machine learning, AI. A lot of what we're seeing now is the replication of data across the enterprise into like a data warehouse, right? And from a data warehouse, you have tool sets that allow you to build those analytics and dashboards and those products that you can then use to make decisions more effectively. What we're doing though from a data mesh perspective is we are transforming the data. So
Okay.
typically when we see a customer migrating to a new ERP, we'll work with them to digest data from all of their different sources. And then within the technology, there are algorithms that are pre-built that allow us to look for inconsistent formatting, and it clusters data together where it sees it as a possible duplicate.
Okay.
So we iterate through the process of cleansing and mastering the data. We build the rules around that so that ultimately when we migrate over, right? So there's technology within the mesh that allows us to automate that migration process to the target system that we're starting with good data,
Okay.
right? So that's the starting point. But then ultimately it's building out a governance strategy on a go-forward basis. So that could be a company that obviously is migrating to a new ERP and wants to set those policies in place on a go-forward basis. But it's going to also be existing companies that are remaining in their source system that really they don't have internal processes or really the technology to govern their data on that go-forward basis.
So I have a story, and then I think it would be interesting, like, to hear how does the software help with that. And the story is, back in my day, I think that's the term you're supposed to say. Back in my
Old
day,
man Callahan.
You don't look that old, Michael. I don't know.
yeah, we used, we had an ERP, and one of the problems was you would have customer service reps who would enter a ship to address or a new bill to it, whatever, right? New customer. But then someone else would go search. And to your point, they would search and maybe they put two spaces on accident, for instance. And they wouldn't find what they needed. And so what do? Oh, well, we're going to build a new business partner. And now we have two of the same business partners. So then when you start running reporting, you start to having to like consolidate all this junk. And it was just miserable. But the problem was like, how do you stop that up front? Like, how do you put in things in place? So how does the data management or the data mesh help with that, those issues?
That's a very good question. That is very common, Michael. So with the technology, what it allows you to do is it allows data to be managed at the source. So the business owns the data, it remains within the systems, but through mesh technology, what we do through integrating the mesh into the applications within their landscape is if somebody goes and creates a new business partner, it would then trigger a workflow in the mesh where the data steward within the organizations that's responsible for that data domain within that region will look at that new record, make sure that it is following the right structure, like all the attributes are defined correctly, the taxonomy is correct. One, is it duplicated? Does it exist already somewhere out there, right? So there's algorithms that will check for that. So that's all kind of built in within the technology. And then once it's good, through automation, it then pushes back to any system that would then consume a customer record, right? So you're really, in that essence, you're having multiple sources of truth, right? So even though you're creating a business partner in one system, through the mesh, it's now making sure that all the systems capture that in the correct way.
Now, I think something that's really important around that, does it stop the process or does it allow them to continue with their process and then just push back and overwrite?
It would stop the process. So it put it into like a pending state,
Okay.
while the data steward would then review, process, and approve that to be used on a go-forward basis. Because the challenge is, if it is a duplicate, the minute you start to transact against it, you're going to have to kind of go back and make those changes.
Reconcile.
So I think the challenge that I'm curious how you all overcome, and it may be a number of people, or I'm not sure what the solution is, but obviously when you put a business partner on hold, people have a little heartache over that because, well, someone's waiting for an order or quote or whatever it is. So how do you expedite that process? What have you seen as good solutions to that?
Yeah, it really all comes down to policy, right? So software is going to solve for how you manage that, but it's business policy you put in place that ensures how you effectively do that. Yeah.
That's fair.
So if it's a new business partner, right, that could be, it getting converted from a possible quote. So there might have been a prospect out there. So how do you manage prospects as an organization?
Mm-hmm.
So all of those things kind of, to me, comes back to your business process and how you manage that.
Yeah. I'd like to bring up a topic. So I work heavily, right, in the discrete manufacturing space. And oftentimes when I bring up this conversation in a simple, conversational way, it's like, hey, how do you feel about your data? Typically the response from an IT department is like, oh yeah, pretty good. We're good on data. But I think I want you to kind of detail for the listeners of like why it's more than just people managing the data and how it's the marriage between people and tools that will enable them to truly have a good handle on that data. Because I think that's where sometimes this gets stuck, is like organizations be like, oh yeah, we've got Fred, Bob, and Sally, and they've got the data on lock, but they don't have the tool set to enable them to truly have it on lock. So can you kind of speak to that? I think it's a misconception within organizations that they are covered and handled.
That's very true. I've come across that many times working with clients, working with IT organizations. If they're not the ones that are consuming the data to make decisions, then their feedback might be somewhat suspect.
Sure.
But what we do is we, as part of the qualification process, when we qualify a customer for using data mesh, is what we'll do is a data discovery. Because a lot of times the IT group or the business users may not understand the true health of their data.
That's true.
So what we do very early in the cycle is we'll ask them to provide to us all of the data, all of the domains, like item, product, vendor. Give us everything you have from all of your sources. We ingest that into the mesh, and we come back to them with the insights around how good their data is.
It's pretty cool.
I think something else that's really important is, we often talk about it's people, process, and technology, right? So all three of these are obviously super critical. But to Tristan's point, what ends up typically happening is, we all know this is good, or we have these processes in place. Well, then you flip that question around and it's okay, talk to me about your processes. And I can tell you ours was do a search. And then after the search, do something else. And so the problem with that is you're continuing to add time. You're also adding manual work, which means I have to think about that every single time and do it perfect. So I think there's this benefit of technology that says, hey, you've put things in place. Guess what? We're going to manage it on the back end. So once it hits us, we're doing the technology's running, the AI is generating and saying, hey, we found some potential matches, and really keeping that data quality clean.
It doesn't scale, Michael, to your point, right? If you have a company growing through acquisition, for example, bringing on new business units, you need to ingest that data, right? Harmonize that data with the business, to manage it on a go-forward basis. If you're using manual processes, having individuals do that's simply not scalable, and that's just prone for error.
I have one final question. It probably won't be one final question, but for right now, it is one final question. The question is the why, right? So, we talk about what we can do, but I think most people think, well, that's great, but why does it matter? So we're doing all this stuff. We go down the road. Why does that matter? What's the ultimate benefit to the organization because we're doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So ultimately, everything we do in a business relies on good data, whether that's process execution, whether that's looking at analytics, reporting and dashboards and things to determine the health of the business, to determine the go-forward strategy for the business, to make smart decisions on how to move forward. That is all predicated on having good data.
And then, I mean, I even think the next step is like, okay, futuristic focus. Where do you want to go? If you want to go AI, which is what everyone talks about, like if your data sucks, your AI is going to suck.
That's right. Yeah, AI, machine learning, that's all being driven by the data in your organization. If that data is not good data, it's garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. I mean, I can't think of how many episodes we've had where we talk data, and data being the ultimate base structure. And if you don't have it, a lot of things are hard down the line.
Yeah, 100% correct.
And some symptoms, like if you had to, talk directly in your discoveries, to a manufacturer, you're already in the room with them. But for those that are kind of watching this, what kind of symptoms would you caution people to look out for to say, hey, we really should take a look at something like this, because we're experiencing XYZ? So what symptoms?
One of the big ones that I've seen is really effectively managing your supply chain. Right. So if I'm an organization that's running multiple sites in multiple countries, maybe multiple languages, my buying efficiency would get negatively impacted if I don't have clean data. My ability to understand what I'm buying, to properly negotiate prices with my vendors, will be lacking. Right.
Yeah.
So there's a market impact, right? How you sell into the market gets impacted, your margins get impacted. So from what I've seen, it's the biggest thing is going to be supply chain.
Yeah.
That's actually very real for a prospective client that I'm working with right now. Is like they're in a market where a penny, a couple pennies makes all the difference, whether on the buy side or on the sell side, right? There's very tight margins. And so we've talked about some various solutions, such as like an augmented intelligence service, to kind of tackle that scenario, to give them predictive, buy price, sell price of given items, that takes into account, their production cost and everything, and market trends. And it's like, it's a great thought, and it's where they're going to go. I firmly believe that. But in order to do that, it's all predicated on strong data. And because right now they're just, you're flapping in the wind a little bit with historicals and, where you feel the market is going to go. This is definitely a heavily like market fluctuation type of thing. So
Tristan, if you think about it, right? Coming out of COVID, all the inflationary pressures we've experienced, now tariffs, right? We're kind of going through that same cycle now. What we've done to help solve for some of that is built a data product within the mesh called Vendor Product Update. And to your use case example, right? It's exactly that. If I'm a large distributor and I'm managing hundreds of thousands of SKUs, but my costing is changing on a very frequent basis, how do I keep up with that as an organization, right? If I'm lagging, maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks behind, then I'm going to experience margin erosion, within
Mhm.
that time frame. So what we've done is we've, through the mesh, automated the process in which vendor pricing is updated. So it's done in real time versus being done manually, and we're seeing those huge legs having negative business impacts.
I can
Yeah.
see so many benefits from that. Not only price, but lead times, but also how many times does no offense, Tristan, but how many times does an engineer go in there and say, I need this nut or bolt or this panel, and they go place that part number, and guess what? We already had that in there. And now we have a whole nother vendor that we're going to go buy it from and lose all that, economies of scale.
Yeah, that happens.
I've seen it firsthand, Michael.
Yeah, I've done it firsthand. So
So I'm going to start to lead us down the path of wrapping up here. Brad, on our extensive questioning, is there anything you feel like we left out and that you want to kind of give your stump speech, if you will, on why this is important, or just any last words that you'd like to give?
Yeah. So the statistics say in the industry, over 80% of companies don't have a data strategy. And as we've talked about, and as we've talked about today, data is a foundational must-have for anything we're going to do, right? Based on process, based on analytics, AI, ML, it's the foundation. So it's a pretty scary statistic. So it's how do we come and understanding where the issues are, how do we solve for that, working with our clients to get them over that hurdle. And what we're seeing, and what the statistics also show, is that companies that do have a strategy in place that's working well, they tend to see a 15% uptick in operational efficiency.
that's really interesting. That's
That
pretty
can
big.
scale into that can improve the health of that bottom line. Pretty
Absolutely.
strong. Okay, well, last question. Brad, I'm always pumped you're on my team. But if you had to choose one person historically to be on your team, could be dead or alive, who's your teammate of choice?
Tristan is not an option. Just FYI.
So is that a person like on my team, like my data team, or just
like your mentorship life team?
You can go pick
you.
anybody.
Yeah, Brad Symaka as a person. Who's Brad Symaka's best teammate?
You know what? I would have to say I've been with Infor 10 years, and I've worked on and off with, him, Alan Hayes.
Oh, yeah.
So when I was in delivery, I did a lot of work with sales. I did solution consulting, ad hoc. I was very involved in kind of building out our business processes, industry practice processes, and I've always interacted with Alan. As I kind of grew in my career within Infor, I've worked closer and closer to Alan. We're now in this role, I actually report to Alan, and he's always been a great mentor and coach and a wonderful leader. Yeah, so I would choose him to be on my team.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
I love it. Yeah,
Alan's
a good guy.
A lot of people. That's pretty.
He's remarkable. Yeah, very talented guy.
Yeah, he's remarkable. So, well, Brad, we appreciate you taking the time to come on with us and chat it up. Super excited about the future of Infor, of the data management solutions, and how they're going to add value to the customers. But in the meantime, everybody, that H2O, I hope you enjoyed the show. So there it is. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for coming.